And welcome to the live stream on this Wednesday before the Belgian Grand Prix, wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good evening, good day, whatever. Thanks for joining us. Looking forward to your questions and comments on YouTube chat. As ever, always a pleasure to do these live streams. The show is yours. Without you, there'd be no show. So thank you very much for being a part of it and joining us. Thank you too to those viewers who've become channel members. Great to have you on board. And don't forget, we'll be doing a live race chat during the Belgian Grand Prix, starting about half an hour before the race and going through to the checkered flag as well. Looking forward to that very much. You probably saw from the, well, probably noticed, hopefully, in the intro, the black and white footage, AP archive footage, wonderful footage they have on their archive on the YouTube platform. The 65 Belgian Grand Prix, that was the famous race that was held in, well, it became torrential, just absolutely horrendous rain. The drops were sort of bouncing 6 inches from the track in the last 20 minutes of the race. And that was and the reason I've got Jimmy and Jackie in there is because it was the Scottish 1-2, and Jimmy won the race, of course. Jackie was a brilliant second in the BRM. Bear in mind, this is his first season in Formula One, only about his fifth Formula One race, maybe his fourth actually. And he and Jimmy in the closing laps started to slow down more than maybe he needed to do, just to make sure that Jackie didn't go too quickly and go off. And he was controlling the race for Jackie as much as he was for himself. And Jackie immediately felt that and backed away as well. And they both just pattered across the line. One of the epic Belgian Grand Prix, really, and obviously on the old circuit. So we go back there this weekend, the new circuit, which is a great track, and not decrying it in any way for modern Formula One, for the paddock, for everything that we love and need in Formula One. It's there. I don't know how long it's going to be on the calendar for. I don't even want to read about it, hear about it, but it's a great race. It's a great race track with some great corners. Eau Rouge these days, unless it's wet, maybe first few laps on full tanks. It's a bit of a kink now. I know that's blind, lots can go wrong at the top of the hill, but in terms of artistry by the driver, it's boom, 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 and you're there. Top of the hill, interesting chicane there, having just got the car stopped with very heavy braking. And then you get into that sort of relatively, it's not that slow a chicane, it's relatively quick. Interesting left-right chicane, then down the hill into that right-hander, which is just understeer City, Arizona. Which is a great corner indeed in terms of looking after the tires and who's quick there looking after the tires. So that's a very nice thing. The left-hander after that, it's a bit annoying, that left-hander, and it's very easy to use too much curb there, get the car a little bit unstable coming out. Down into Pouin, lovely, fast left-hander, one of the great corners of Spa that wasn't on the old Spa circuit. Down to Stablo, the S's there. Again, reasonably quick S's, chicane S's, nice to see. Again, not on the old circuit, a new part of Spa. And then they join the old track again, going up the hill through Blanchimont and towards the last piff-paff chicane, as the French would call it, past the scene of, sadly, the place where we lost Archie Scott Brown and Dick Seaman, and that stretch up towards La Source and into the La Source hairpin. So yeah, lots of tragedy at Spa, lots of terrible things. Speaking of which, not speaking of which at all, but you will recall that I did recently a piece on Alan Stacey interviewing his uncle, his nephew, Alan Stacey's nephew, Alan Stacey Jr., I guess. And he was talking about the brilliance of Alan Stacey, a Formula One driver for Lotus, who lost his right leg below the knee and had to drive with the hand throttle throughout his racing career, was super quick, a mentor to Sir John Whitmore, and sadly lost his life in that Belgian Grand Prix 1960. Driving for Lotus, supposedly a bird hit him in the face. We'll never really know what happened, but it was a terrible weekend anyway from Formula One. We lost Chris Bristow also in that 60 Belgian Grand Prix, and in the practice sessions, both Sterling Moss and Mike Taylor had huge accidents as well when things broke on their Lotuses. Anyway, there's method to my madness, because it's interesting that there is a Lotus Elite out there racing in historic events now with a one-off 2-litre Coventry Climax Formula One engine in it. Coventry Climax in 1960 were building 2.5-litre Formula One engines. This was obviously reduced to 2 litres, put in this Elite with the purpose of winning Le Mans, literally outright in 1960. Super quick in a straight line. The whole car weighed about 700 kilos. Lotus Elite, beautiful car. And it was all looking good until Spa, the Belgian Grand Prix, occurred. And Alan Stacey was down to drive it with Innes Island. And when he was killed, Innes lost his flavor for doing Le Mans anyway. And the car never raced at Le Mans. But now it's been beautifully restored and revived. And guess who has sent us, who's driving it? Guess who's sent us an onboard of driving this 2-litre Lotus Elite, beautifully restored now, as I say, around Clermont-Ferrand, would you believe? The Charade circuit at Clermont-Ferrand, last used for Formula One in 1972. I was at that French Grand Prix, 72, and I'll always remember the sound of Chris Amon's Matra in the mountains there, above the city of Clermont-Ferrand, home of Michelin tires, of course. This beautiful Charade circuit, which was a mini sort of Nürburgring, no doubt about that. The track now on which they race historics mainly, I think, is not quite as long, but it's still got a bit of the flavor of that French Grand Prix track. And no better than Horatio Fitzsimon, the driver of this Elite, to explore its ability around Charade, a circuit on which it would never have raced in its prime, and to do the car justice. So before we do anything else, I want to show you this onboard from Horatio recently around Clermont. One thing I would point out is that about 3 or 4 corners into the lap, he goes into a right-hander, a right-hander, which is all part of the old original track. And that is the corner where Helmut Marko had the stone came up from a car in front of him and went through his goggles and, sorry, his visor. And he was wearing a Bell Star and took his eye out. And that was the corner where it happened. And shortly after that, there's another section where Henri Pescarolo massively destroyed Frank Williams' March in practice in 72 as well. So those 2 corners are still there. And you'll recognize the last bit as well if you ever watch footage of any Grand Prix there. As classic Clermont-Ferrand circuits, they come round the last corner down to that pit straight again. Anyway, with no more ado, here's Horatio's onboard with that 2-litre amazing Lotus Elite, which supposedly was doing something like would have done and then in the tests at Le Mans was doing something over 165, 170 miles an hour at Le Mans on the Mulsanne Straight. That's how good the power weight ratio was on this thing. The purity of heel and towing, of gear changing, the H pattern, just a 4-speed gearbox, but quite ample. I mean, the torque on that engine, the power, every time he's on the throttle, do you see how the back end just comes out? I mean, I don't know what the power to weight ratio was, but it was just a stunning race car. And they have, of course, going back to historic Le Mans now. So that elite will eventually get to, to taste Le Mans and see how quick it'll be. So yeah, just wonderful stuff from Horatio. Big thanks to him for that and his team, and congrats on the restoration job they've done on that. One other matter of moment, only because it coincides with the approximate date of today, not quite. Martin Tomlinson has sent a very nice picture that he's created of Juan Manuel Fangio winning the 56 British Grand Prix at Silverstone. Lovely shot. And the significance of that is that Martin was actually at that race. Would you believe? He said, just, I'll paraphrase his little letter that came with the print. 70 years ago, as a young boy, I went to my first Grand Prix with my dad and granddad on the 14th of July, 56. The British Grand Prix was run over 101 laps of Silverstone. 101 laps. Impressive, eh? The winner received £500. The second place driver, £300. In addition, the chief mechanic of the winning car was given £25 for his trouble. It's probably a lot more than they get today from the winner race, I would imagine. So what does he say? Britain, the first race on the program was a Formula 2 event, started at 10:30. Roy Salvadori in a Cooper was the winner, from one Colin Chapman driving his own F2 Lotus. Just before the start of the Grand Prix, the popular music was played over the tannoy loudspeakers to entertain the crowds. Included was a tune called Whistling Rufus, played by racing enthusiast Chris Barber, who obviously then became a big part of the British motor racing scene for many years, and was playing live at the 64 British Grand Prix, that's for sure, and other events after that. Grand Prix itself started at 12:30, no TV schedules to worry about in those days. Circuit was packed 10 deep with spectators anticipating a great race. I was fortunate the group of Welsh firemen got me to the front. They were watching at Maggots, had an uninterrupted view, but his dad and granddad didn't get to see that much. Cars lined up in a 4-3 grid formation. Poleman Sterling Moss and the Maserati was joined on the front row by the Lancia Ferraris of Fangio and Collins and Hawthorne's BRM. What I remember mostly was the huge cheer from the usually reserved British crowd as the BRM of Mike Hawthorne came past in the lead on the first lap, followed by teammate Brooks, who had started from the third row, exclamation mark. That's, of course, the race in which Brooks had that massive shunt at Abbey, crashed his BRM at Abbey, lucky to have been thrown out of the burning car, taken off to hospital. So then they had a sports car race afterwards, which Sterling Moss won in a Maserati. Great in those days. All the Grand Prix drivers had to go in their Formula in other categories as well on the same day. And so, Martin, thank you very much indeed for that little reminder. Yeah, it's good, isn't it? It's the excuse for running it is that today is what, the 15th of July, 2026. So yeah. Things, have they changed? Yeah, I suppose they've changed. As I say, mechanics probably don't get quite that much these days when they win a Grand Prix. Being very, very facetious, obviously, as ever. Windsor, behave yourself. So let's have a look now at your questions and comments and get going on those. First is from Sarian Rathan. Hi, Peter. Hope you're doing well. I am. Thank you very much indeed. Do you know who designs a circuit, and what are the basic criteria for corners applied to bring out the best of an F1 car? I wonder if there's a hidden meaning in that question. In other words, get your act together, guys. Well, obviously Herman Tilke is the main man, and he's been the main man since what, turn of the well, yeah, I mean, his first racetrack was Malaysia, which opened, I think, in 99, and everything was accelerated towards that whole Tilke era following the death of Ayrton Senna, when Max and Bernie finally decided, Max Mosley that is, that they would need to completely change the way Formula One dealt with danger, basically, and that was a two-pronged attack: the cars and the tracks. and great work was done on the cars. Great work was done on the tracks in terms of saving lives. And the first, and Tilke became the sort of standard bearer of the new template for Formula One tracks, with lots of runoff area, primarily. And I think probably second was the ability to put up advertising hoardings where Bernie wanted them, and where the sponsors of the race and his series got maximum exposure under his control, because he would then tell the TV cameras which corners to focus on more than others. And that changed the face of it all, really. And then I suppose third, they thought about, oh yeah, you know, close racing or creating more accidents, first corner shunts, whatever. I don't think creating great corners thereafter was ever. I think Tilke did. I think he did. And if you look at his early designs, primarily Malaysia, great track. You look at circuits like Turkey, very good as well. Lots of great corners there. Though, you know, I think he has a great feel for racing, Herman Tilke, but I think that got watered down over the years by budget, by speed of having to build these tracks, and also by those other primary requirements: A, safety; B, you know, commercial issues. These days, Clive Bowen also does a very good job. He's with a company called Apex, from memory. And if you were a mayor of a city anywhere in the world and you were thinking about a street race, not necessarily Formula One, Clive Bowen would be your man for sure, I would say. And then there's an Italian group called Dromo, who are responsible, that's probably the right word, for the redesign of Zandvoort and that bank corner. And no surprise, they've also been very much involved with the circuit in Madrid as well. I can't yet bring myself to call it the Mad Ring. I just think it's such a silly name. But anyway, I suppose eventually we will. The Madrid circuit, with its bank corner, where everybody's saying, oh, wow, isn't it mega? But to me, a bank corner it makes a flat corner much easier because it's banked. I still don't see the point of it. I do see the point that the TV people think it's wonderful and it looks great on big screens. But in terms of what we want from the drivers, you know, how many times has a driver said, that's a great corner, if it was banked, I could just take it completely flat? You know, that's the whole point of banking. It just makes the corner easier. And to me, it's a shame that they've got that bank corner, but I suppose everyone will love it and everyone will rave about it, and there we go. But anyway, that's a new Italian group. Good young guy running that, Jarno. I can't remember his family name, but he's a good guy, and I think he's got his heart in the right place too, basically. Although obviously he knows what's important in terms of keeping F1 happy and all the commercial requirements in the follow-on from Tilke. So yeah, good question. But as I say, Clive Bowen, good man, and he would be, you know, he can do well. He can do a lot more than just Formula One tracks. He's really good. Aaron, hi Peter. If teams were allowed to run only one car, do you think they would have a better or worse chance of winning the World Drivers' Championship? We're just going to do one thing before we do that. Just want to make sure. I'm always a bit paranoid about audio and everything. It seems to be okay, right? Sorry about that. If teams were allowed to run only one car, do you think they would have a better or worse chance of winning the World Drivers' Championship, e.g. Red Bull with only Max in 25? Uh, I think so. I don't think today. No, I think today running two cars is, you know, it's not that. Dare I say, it's not that difficult in terms of parts, personnel, time, everything else. It's much more of an achievable. Running two identical cars is much more of an achievable feat than it was even 20 years ago, let alone 30, 40 years ago. Much more difficult then. Particularly, I mean, the teams are always scratching around. They sold their cars at the end of the year, and the money they made financed the next year's racing, and so on and so forth. Sponsors were few on the ground, and you didn't want to be a number two driver at several Formula One teams, Lotus being a classic example. But these days, I don't think it makes a lot of difference. I mean, the big thing was Hesketh with James Hunt. That was good, wasn't it? They focused on him. Jody Scheckter, first year at Wolf, focused on him, won his first Grand Prix with Wolf, won the team's Grand Prix, you know, almost won the World Championship, one car. But I think, you know, Ferrari have run one car over the years. Matra have run one car, Chris Amon for a while. But in general, two cars gives the team more chance of scoring points. There is a constructors championship, so you'd want that. World Drivers' Championship. If you look at a guy like Max, if you look at the team, when Max isn't going to win every race, even if he's got a great car. And so you want the other guy to win, basically. And that's, you cover all your losses. Jason Joe Laviette. Hi, Peter. I'm a huge fan. Thank you very much. And Jason, very kind. YouTube's word limit on questions rarely leaves room to say thank you or how much I look forward to these sessions. I started watching Formula One in 2000, and it took me a while of listening to your voice on this channel to realize that it was the same voice behind the camera in all those post-race interviews with Schumi, Kimi, Montoya, etc. It was a nice aha moment when it clicked. Well, thank you very much. Yep, indeed. I did do those. They used to be called the unilateral interviews. Not quite sure. I suppose because it went out to everybody as distinct from just one broadcaster. And it was always in a funny little pokey studio behind the podium somewhere. And yeah, they were great. I used to really enjoy that. And times have changed, and we move on, and YouTube is definitely right up there in terms of my favorite things now, because, well, apart from anything else, what we're doing right now, that wasn't possible back in my unilateral days. And equally, being relatively arrogant, probably, it's really nice not having a director in my ear all the time saying, move on, boring, this guy's boring, move on, next question. And that used to be really irritating, because I'd be talking to somebody, and I'm not going to mention any names, I'd be talking to a driver, and let's say his first answer was a bit boring, but let's say he'd said something in there, in that first answer, like, well, it was a difficult race and nothing went very well, and after we had the pit stop, the delay, I was very lucky to finish third, but I'd like to thank my mechanics. I would be primed to say, so what exactly did go wrong in the pit stop? What was that all about? Or something like that. And the director would be in my ear saying, move on, next question. And that would be really annoying. And sometimes with the unilateral, they actually told me what questions to ask the drivers before they even sat down. Now, you make sure your first question to Michael should be this, or, and I'm thinking, I don't want to ask Michael that. I know what he's going to say. He's just going to look at me and think, what a dumb question. So sometimes I disobey the rules. It's probably why I don't do it anymore. I haven't been asked to do it anymore. And I'm a great one for feeling that interviews should be conversations and not sound bites. And if you want sound bites, I'm not really your guy. And I love getting drivers to go down a tributary of where they've been. The main flow is this way, and then you've got this annex off to the right or left. And it's usually a question that is way left field, and the drivers usually quite enjoy that and start talking about it. And I'm always quite amused at how many other journalists then start writing down, and the recorders go up. Oh wow, he's never spoken about that before. I love doing all that, but anyway, we do it on YouTube now, kind of, so it's good. So there's the next one. There is a chatter. What is all this? Sorry. There's a chatter about bringing back, this is from Jason again, there's a chatter about bringing back refueling, mostly negative comments and how it's bad for racing. I quite enjoyed it, the different strategies the teams would take. Your thoughts? Well, for me, that whole refueling era was colored by two things. One, the inequality of the fuel filling rigs provided by the FIA for all the teams from race to race, and some would flow faster than others. And I think that was always a recipe for disaster in terms of fairness and ongoing racing. It would be ridiculous if that happened today. If they did break refueling and it was it was a central distribution of the rigs every Thursday afternoon, and some rigs were better than others. I mean, imagine that now, today, it'd be horrendous. And then the other thing was, of course, that was at a time when you had to start on the race fuel that you'd qualified with. And so that they had that rule in there basically to stop anybody, qualifying with an empty car. But of course, it didn't stop anybody starting with enough fuel to do only 5 laps. And so you got a lot of weird polls out there and qualifying results based on people running, ridiculously light fuel just to get into the headlines. I remember Toyota, Ralf Schumacher used to do that quite a lot. Nick Heidfeld too. And, that was all just light fuel, and it just basically devalued qualifying. So I don't know. I don't have fond memories of that. And then we did have the odd fire as well, didn't we? The whole Steve Matchett, Jos Verstappen, Benetton, Nürburgring, sorry, Hockenheim fire. not a good thing at all. So I don't think it'll happen, and I don't think we need it. I think if people are saying they want refueling, and I think you're saying it'll be quite interesting, but we don't need strategy. The problem today is not strategy, lack of possibility of different strategies. The problem today are the cars with the power units they have and the way the drivers have to drive them, and the lack of penetrating TV coverage behind the scenes of all the technology. And we talked about this with Mark Slade the other day, you know, and he agrees with me, I think 100%, which is that there's so much out there that TV is not allowed to cover or not covering, either because they don't have the budget or they're too lazy or whatever, which is such a shame because the Formula One show is much more than just the tip of the iceberg. It's a huge thing. And if right now we had lots and lots of access to the teams, how they're preparing for Spa, Honda particularly, what's going on there, then, you know, Formula One would benefit massively from that. We don't need to change much. We just need to make better use of what we've got, in my opinion. Speaking of Honda, I wonder how many Honda people are still there that remember when BAR Honda went to Spa for the first time, and every time they went through Eau Rouge, basically the amount of oil surged through the engine just blew the engines apart with the pistons. That was pretty horrendous, wasn't it? Probably a different generation now. Alessandro Durango. Hi, Peter. Do you know if the Formula One exhibition might come to Italy? There were rumors a while ago, but nothing since. By the way, I spent an incredibly exciting week at Silverstone. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. Oh, that's brilliant, Alessandro. Glad you had a great time at Silverstone. I can't remember if you're the one that said you're a Charles Leclerc fan, but if you were, one of our viewers was saying, oh, you know, how do you think Charles will go at Silverstone? Well, you must be very happy. I think I can't imagine the exhibition's not going to Italy, to be honest. It's going everywhere now, isn't it? It's opening in, I don't know, Australia pretty soon. So I haven't kept in touch with the exact plans, but I'd be shocked if it's not coming to Italy. I can't really say more than that though. Jason Joe Laviette, uh, again, I'm for improving safety measures, but have tracks like Spa lost their charm over the years with track tire and car changes? Somehow seems less a challenging track to drive and less when wet. Well, I don't think the old Spa ever had a lot of charm, to be honest. It was just fearsome and scary and dangerous and a challenge that everybody had to meet with gritted teeth and put their heads down and get on with it. And it was just on the calendar. It was the Belgian Grand Prix, and everybody had raced there before, you know, Fangio and co. So there was no excuse not to go and do it as well. So I think the new track actually has more charm than the old track. The old track definitely has a much greater fear factor, but is that a good thing? I mean, all those ridiculous shunts that used to occur. I mean, just one that you probably don't even remember. In that 65 race, actually, in the wet, Richard Atwood, who was driving a Parnell Lotus 25 BRM, an older, you know, 2-year-old Lotus, sold to Parnell so the Team Lotus could go racing the following year, just aquaplaned off in the closing laps of the race when the rain was pelting down and hit a tree, and the car just disintegrated. And luckily, Richard stepped out of it. I mean, it's just luck, absolute luck. But probably for sure the biggest shunt he had in his career. And that because he wasn't hurt, it was, oh, you know, Richard Atwood escaped unharmed when he went off at the end of the race. That's how it would have been covered by the journalists. But yeah, so many things to hit at Spa, and yeah, I don't know. So what's the actual question? Um, I like the new Spa. I think, you know, it's probably the old Spa. 5 years from now, oh, great circuit, the old new Spa. But I still call it the new Spa, and I like it because it's got a couple of really, really nice corners. Pouin is the best probably, but I quite like that Stavelot section. I quite like the top of the hill, and you know, the whole last chicane thing is a bit silly, but up the hill it's impressive. It's not, doesn't require that much skill, but it's a good circuit, and they've done a nice job of adapting it to Formula One, I think, over the years. So all good luck to the Belgians, and I guess there'll be a lot of Dutch there as well, won't there? Very near the Dutch border, a lot of Max fans there. Should be great this weekend. Looking forward to that. Just going to a super chat here. Thank you very much indeed. Saying basically in response to what we were just talking about with refueling, I think refueling will not work for me. There would be simple rule: every team should use all 3 tires to make the race interesting. Yeah, Yeah, we talked about that as well. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you could do that. I'm not, again, you could make the race interesting if it was if it was a one-stop strategy race and you had to run all three compounds. Yes, there are more pit stops then, but that presupposes that pit stops themselves are interesting. Personally, I think it's more interesting that some cars are better on tyre wear than others, and some drivers are better on tyre management than others. And I think the current rules allows that to be seen. So why do we want to put lots of straitjackets on everything to limit? Already we're limiting the ability of drivers like Charles or Max or others, Lewis to some extent. Not so much Kimi because the Mercedes is such a good car, but we're limiting the ability of the great drivers to do what they used to be able to do into certain types of corners because of what they're having to do with all the power harvesting. So why do we then want to put another straitjacket in? Oh, well, you maybe get on tire management. It doesn't mean much anyway because you've got to come in for a pit stop in 3 laps time. So just thrash the tires. I think that's wrong. I think it's just putting all these things over it. Just let the people race and let the fans understand more of what they're doing by having much more access with the cameras behind the scenes into the technology and into the people who make the team what it is. If I think about how fortunate I've been in Formula One in my lifetime and the number of different race personnel I've worked with. Obviously, I've worked with two Formula One teams, Ferrari and Williams, and I've worked with a lot of drivers. I've got to know a lot of people. But if I think of the highlights of all that tapestry, I don't think of race wins or exciting moments. I think of the people. I think of the laughs we had. I think of the little incidents with the people, maybe dinner, maybe driving to an airport, maybe at an empty test track circuit somewhere. It could be anything. And that's all the stuff that could be covered on television, all that real life stuff. And it's not. None of it is. And that's the great shame of Formula One. More than any other sport, we have all these layers. We have, how many sports in the world have teams of over 1,000 people? None. And that's the beauty of Formula One. And we're not allowing ourselves to cover it. That's the problem. And if we had that access, let's call it Mercedes TV, let's call it McLaren TV, let's call it Ferrari TV. And the fans could just get onto that and live stream the meetings that were going on and the work that's going on in the wind tunnels and and obviously, yes, the teams have their ability to put out of focus blurs where it's really critical information and you've got to have some sort of filter. Not difficult, very easy for anybody that knows anything about racing to find those filters, but give the fans access to everything that's going on and then you've solved it. Then Formula One is fascinating regardless of whether it's a race with no pit stops and a guy that leads from start to finish, because you know what's gone into that win, and which guy in the front suspension design department has got a bet with the guy in the wind tunnel about which component is going to have a bigger effect on the result of the race or whatever it is. All these things that you can talk about and capture are all there, and we're not capturing them, and that's what needs to happen, in my opinion. Jez James. Hi, Peter. Did you ever talk to Nigel about the day fans jumped onto the track after he won the British Grand Prix and lifted him out of the car? Yeah, we we used to joke about it a lot. That guy that actually jumped on the side pod, which is in the exhibition at the moment, that actual side pod with the crack in it, of the 14B, uh, being interviewed by one of the London tabloids on the Monday after the race. He's in the hospital with a broken leg because he fell off and the rear wheel just spun him in the air and he broke his leg. Not Nigel's fault, obviously. And he said, "Oh, it was an honour to have my leg broken by Nigel Mansell." Oh, that was one of the great quotes. And Nigel and I just cracked up over that. I think we just laughed all day about that one. It was brilliant. So yeah, I mean, Nigel didn't mind it at all. Of course, he loved to go on about how it was dangerous and this and that, but it wasn't really. It was just like, yeah, he was crawling around, wasn't he? People everywhere. I thought it was a brilliant thing. It's so sad that doesn't happen anymore, to be honest. Of course, the team doesn't want it to happen because the car does get damaged, and yeah, there is a propensity for accidents, so it'll never will happen. But at the time, yeah, I don't think Nigel loved it. Marco's What's this one all about? 1 second. Just got to clear my browser. Here we go. Um, it says, Marco says, refueling was subverted by lack of equal rigs, small raised front wings, and Ferrari dominance. I'd like to see it with current multi-compound tire rigs. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, maybe you all would. I've just been giving my opinion, and that is, I hate to see more regs, more control, more, what is it, straight jackets around the racing. I just want the racing to be free. I want to see the fastest car on the pole. I want to see the best car and driver win the race from start to finish. And I want to see what goes on behind the scenes with all the mega TV that I've just been talking about. And I'd like here's another thing. I think I think the whole Pirelli hot laps thing is massively underused, and I don't blame Pirelli for this, and they're doing it the right way, I suppose. You know, customers and celebrities, whatever it is, and Formula One get involved and all the rest of it. But I think that should be a much more attainable thing for the fans, and there should be a way of the general fans having an opportunity to be driven around a circuit by a Formula One driver. But much more importantly, I think the biggest thing they miss is they don't have the name on the car in big letters of the driver of that car. So you see a McLaren road car coming through, you know, Beckett's or wherever, and it's beautiful drifts. And you think, wow, who's driving that car? And you have no idea. You know, it could be Lando Norris, could be, I don't know, could be anybody. So I think they need to do a lot more with that and make it, and they should have days. Okay, here's an idea. They should have days when the fans can, by lottery or, I don't know, a small purchase, whatever, lottery, queue up, do laps with the drivers. I think that would be a brilliant thing. Driving with a Grand Prix driver is one of the best things you can do in our sport. And it's not something you can ever reproduce again. It's unique to our sport. You can play golf, yeah, you can play in a pro-am, but you've still got to hit the ball in your own, you know, ridiculous way and alongside the pro, and all the time you're in awe of the pro and you're just enjoying the moment. You're not enjoying your own golf, having to get the ball out of the water every second shot. But in motor racing, there's no argument there. You're just strapped in next to the Grand Prix driver and you just sit back and enjoy. And we don't use that enough. Maybe the hot laps thing isn't the solution because it's so, you know, control and so commercial these days, but there definitely should be days for the fans at various circuits when the fans can go and be driven around by Grand Prix drivers. I think that's definitely something that's got to be done more. And no, I can't think of a person on the planet Earth who, if they sat next to Charles Leclerc or Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen for a lap of Zandvoort, and it doesn't even have to be a quick car, you know, just a normal road car, wouldn't remember that for the rest of their days. I guarantee it. And we don't, and it's an easy thing to do, relatively easy thing to do, and we don't do it. Oh no, don't do that. No, no. And you know, because people just don't think laterally, do they? That's the problem. Another one here saying agreed. Maybe with me, maybe with, it's usually agreed with somebody else on the on the chat, but it's from Marcos again. Agreed. Bring back points for fastest lap and the pole. 10 points for pole, 5 for second, 2 points for fastest race lap. Make it worthwhile and rewarding. Yeah, I mean, we had that fastest race lap, didn't we? Pole point, and that was stopped because too many teams would put on, you know, out of the running, you just put on a set of soft tires right at the end, you go out and the back marker gets the point for fastest lap. Then they try to change it saying, oh, well, if you're not in the top 10, it didn't count. And now they've stopped it altogether. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why. I think it was quite, why? I mean, it was quite a good thing. And pole, yeah, why not? I suppose it's because they think it would detract from the sprint races. And if we didn't have the sprint races, they probably would have a point for pole. But because if you win a sprint race, you get some points, not a lot, but you get some points, then that's the equivalent of, I suppose it's that. You know, I know we're going to more sprint races next year, which I think is a mistake. I don't think that's one way. I don't think that's a way of, if there are any problems with Formula One at the moment, the only problems really are with the power units and the way the drivers are unable to use the power units the way they should. That's the problem, I think. and we're not really solving that. And we're looking at all these other areas, putting down bits of sticking plaster, thinking, oh, that'll make it better. This will do this. This will make us more money. And it's all just quick fixes that we don't actually need. Welcome, everybody, says Max Flashart, the man behind my new merchandise store, which we have. If you haven't seen that, Max, thank you so much again for your "Make Corners Great Again" catchphrase, which you can buy the T-shirt now on the store, and you'll see the link in the description below this video. And we've also got "Make Corners Great Again." We've got 60/40 is not enough, and the latest one is "Bring Back V8s." So I'm not sure I'm going to do one that says "Bring Back Refueling" or run all 3 Pirelli compounds. I have to think about that. I'm not sure I will, but I'm still, I'm thinking of doing I mean, at the time it worked well because most people in the Indianapolis area were around at the time this T-shirt came out. But there was a T-shirt, a great T-shirt that said, "I saw Jim Clark win the 1966 Indy 500," which is, of course, the race in which he finished second. Graham Hill won it. But it was some sort of lap scoring drama going on. I say some sort. There was a lap scoring drama going on. Dean Delamont of the RAC was out there. Jabby Cronbach, interestingly, insisted that Graham Hill won that race and Jimmy had lost a lap. But I still doubt that, only because my friend Nigel Roebuck, 20 years later, was at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway cafe, listening to some old codgers talking about that race. And all of them said, "Oh yeah, Jim Clark won that race." And Nigel went over there, having been eavesdropping, saying, "Wow, you guys all think," and it turned out they were all USAC stewards who had been at that race. And they all said, yeah, Jim Clark won that race. But once the winner had been declared as Graham Hill, we couldn't go back on it, and that was it. And Jimmy took the news really well. So anyway, I think that deserves a T-shirt. I'm quite sure. I can't say "I saw" anymore. It should be "Jim Clark won the '66 Indy 500," and then in brackets, "With all respect to Graham Hill," something like that. Hit the like button. Thank you very much. Or does that mean you like Jensen button? No, nothing wrong with that at all. Jensen, good bloke, quick driver. Barry Van Dijk, probably. The announcement that Russell or Hamilton will be replaced for 27. Is that a surprise? You know, has that actually been announced? I don't think it has. I haven't received that announcement. Or is that something that the internet has announced in its wisdom, in its great wisdom? I said to Cameron, bless him, Cameron's a real news hound, isn't he? Very good. I said to Cameron, in answer to a question along the lines of, what about Max? And I said, well, the most logical thing would be for him to go to Mercedes, because they could, you can imagine Mercedes putting him there alongside Kimi Antonelli and having the ultimate team. And he said, well, what if George is under contract? I said, well, this is what you'd do. And the next thing I know, there's a video out saying Windsor says Verstappen is definitely going to Mercedes, which I didn't say, but Cameron nicely paraphrased it. So no problems at all. But just for the record, I'm not saying he definitely will. I'm just saying that if that is something that Toto Wolff wants to do and Max wants to do, I don't think it's impossible for them to pull it off. And if they did pull it off, it would be Antonelli, Max Verstappen. Lewis out of the car in 27. He's on, really? I think John Elkann will have something to do with that, doesn't it? I think he's under contract for 27. Not that I've seen his contract. And if he's now won a Grand Prix and he's right up there with Charles, I think he's in pretty solid ground there, isn't he? Anyway, intro screen starting soon. Yeah, let's go. Hi, Peter. Hi. To be honest, are you enjoying anything about this season? Star. Is that a question to me? Yeah, of course I am. I'm enjoying all the storylines, if that's the right word. I'm not enjoying the new regulations at all. But then I never expected to anyway, so I suppose I'm slightly biased. I just don't. I think they made changes that didn't need to be made. The power units are very disappointing, and I don't think they've helped at all. And we could have been green enough in Formula One by just focusing on reusable fuels. And so, exotic organic fuels. And we're not doing that. We've got all these we've made the engines much too complicated and the drivers can't do much with it. Max Flashart, did you engine Goodwood Festival of Speed? No, I was busy on a lot of other stuff at the weekend. Liam Lawson got to drive the Ford. Yeah. Well, that's the car that also, if you haven't seen it, there's a very good Ford video of Arvid Lindblad driving that car. He and Max choose various Fords to do a lap of a circuit in America. And Arvid chooses that car, which I thought was brilliant. And he drives it really well. So yeah, I'm sure Liam drove it well too. He would have loved it. Of course, the Ford GT40 Mark II is the car that his countrymen, Bruce McLaren and Chris Amon, won Le Mans in '66. That famous podium where Chris is wearing a BP jacket because he's just done the French Grand Prix, or about to do the French Grand Prix for Cooper, who are sponsored by BP, and they've obviously given him a jacket, even though the Ford GT was using Shell fuel and oils, and Shell did a big advertisement around it. I love it. Only Chris Amon could do that. Well, more to the point, only in the '60s would they not have cared about that. Chris in the BP jacket on the podium, having won the race in the Shell-sponsored Ford GT. Brilliant. I love Chris. I mean, Chris Amon was just fabulous. Just the funniest one-liners I've ever heard came from Chris Amon. One of the most famous, actually, was not a one-liner really, but apparently Nigel Roebuck, who's very close friends with Chris, was telling me once that Chris had been away for like a week, and he came home, and obviously, and his girlfriend wife probably, Tish was obviously looking forward to seeing him. And then there was Rupert, the Basset Hound, Chris's Basset Hound. And Tish told Nigel that she hadn't seen Chris for a week, and it was been a long trip back. And there's a knock on the door, and Rupert's barking and everything. And she opens the door, and the first thing Chris does is go down to Rupert and say, "Hello, Rupert. How are you, mate? I've missed you." And completely ignores Tish. I love it. Actually, I think I'm guilty of the same sins with Dexter, actually. Anyway, that's another subject altogether. Although I got to tell you a great Dexter story, because every evening when I go out with him for a walk, it being the summer in Spain, it's a bit humid. And so I always spray myself with, insecticide, anti-insect spray, which a lot of it in Spain, and it's all smells quite nice. It's all quite good. It's easy to put on. You put it everywhere. And after about 3 times of doing this, Dexter knew immediately, as soon as I went for the insect spray, he knew it was going for a walk, and he'd start jumping up and down and get very excited. So for the last couple of weeks, I've waited for him to be out in the garden playing football, as he does, destroying his World Cup football, and waited for him to be totally distracted by that. Then I've gone into the furthest bathroom I can find in our villa here with the insect spray, shut the door, shut the windows, and sprayed myself there, knowing that Dexter wouldn't then hear it or smell it, and I would come out and just say, "Come on, Dexter, let's go for a walk," and just sort of surprise him like that. That was the plan. And on every occasion, within about 20 seconds of spraying the thing, there's Dexter just putting his paw on the door, letting me know he's right outside the door, ready to go for the walk. And I have no idea how he knows. It can't be the sound. It can only be the smell. But I'm in a locked bathroom at the other end of the villa. He's in the garden out the back, and he can sense that I'm putting on insect spray. I'm going to find a way of fooling him. I'm definitely going to find a way. Anyway, Zishan Afsar, Peter, on pure pace, Kimi still seems faster than George Russell. Do you think driving style is main contributor towards this? Anything else? And how would Max fare against Kimi in the Merc? 100%. I wouldn't say style, driving ability, and what he's doing with the car management is a better way of phrasing it. It's not just a style thing. Style implies you're all basically hitting the same note, but some are improvising a little bit beforehand, and some have got a little bit of harmony. In the case of Kimi, he's actually hitting a different note to George on some of the corners. And that's not just style, that's completely different thing. And it's all down, as I said before many times, it's all down to the rates of input that Kimi has into a racing car and a road car, which is why everybody should be out in road cars. I'd love to do a lap of any circuit in the world with Kimi Antonelli. I really would. I'd love to get a feel for his rates of input. And it is about that. It's, when the car is about to move like that, your rates of input in responding or anticipating it are exactly at the same rate that the energy is moving the car. And it's not over the top. It's not spiky. It's not creating a spike. It's just more than the car requires, or less for that matter. So, and that's the difference. And no matter what, however you want to break that down, if you're looking at Kimi's telemetry against George's telemetry, you can see probably slightly different braking areas. You can probably see slightly different areas in which they put the power on or have the power off, or the rate at which they're putting on the power. You can see a lot of that stuff, but you can't see the rate of input. It's too microscopically small, and it's between the digits. And that's why, that's why he's got George, because he's just doing it slightly better. He's doing it from a platform that George doesn't have. George has a different platform. His platform is based on feeling breakaway points and feeling how late he can brake just before the tire starts to lock up. And yes, he has an ability perfectly to work within that world, but it's a completely different platform to the one on which Kimi Antonelli is operating from, which is all to do with these perfect rates of input. And from that, Kimi can then exploit areas that George doesn't exploit, like maybe shortening the corner, or maybe getting a rotation a little bit, get a little bit more turn mid corner, get the car a little bit straighter on exit, which is shortening the corner in effect. It's just not happening going into the corner. George isn't able to do that because he's constantly stretching the car, and he's on the limit of that stretch. It's great to watch. And I would say 90% of the world's great Grand Prix drivers, 90% of the world's very fast Formula One drivers drive exactly as the way George drives. And not many of them do it as well as George. But that last 10%, I'm talking about since the age dot, going back to 1897, but that last 10%, maybe it's a smaller percentage than that, drive on a different level, which is all about rates of input. And that, if you're an engineer and you talk to Kimi, I suspect that his ability to feel rates of input and put them in at the right rate doesn't come out in any of his vocab. It comes out in the lap time and the tire wear and the evenness of the tire wear. He will still talk about a bit of understeer here, a bit of oversteer there, more flap, less flap. He'll talk about all those things. He wants better traction. He wants whatever, more stability under braking. They're all just normal things, that boxes that you check, but he's checking them from a different platform level. That's the difference. And that's why, he's very, and Max is the same. I think Charles is the same. That's why Charles has been able quite quickly to make it work. It's taken, I'd say quite quickly, it's actually taken quite a long time. 3 races, quite a long time to get it right, but he's kind of got it right. This is the parameter you need in order to harvest the energy and deploy it. Now go and make it work within what you can do. And I still think it was a mistake for him to complicate that by changing brake friction material. But Lewis has found a balance where he can start to, his rates of input have always been brilliant, Lewis. He doesn't exploit that rates of input ability in the way he used to, but that doesn't matter because these regulations really don't lend themselves to that anyway. He's just driving to what the regulations will allow him to do with the deployment, with the harvesting, and he's doing it with beautiful rates of input, which he's always had. Right up there with Kimi and Charles and Max. And Max, of course, is the other one who can do that so well. Sandwich. G'day, Peter. Well, sadly, the British Open is not, the Open is not at Sandwich this year. But anyway, g'day is all I can say. Yeah, absolutely. G'day. Thank you, everybody who sent the odd message about the fires and our welfare. We're fine, feeling thoughts are with all those that suffered so much with the fires, which are about 2 hours away from us, further south, different terrain, different everything. But fires, it appears, started by collapsed power cable, so that could really happen anywhere in the world that's arid and dry in the summer, whether it be California, whether it be here, whether it be Africa, anywhere. So yeah, very sad, and thoughts are with all of them. Barish Karadesh, hi Peter. If Max moves to McLaren, how do you think Lando will fare against him in the same car? Yeah, I mean that is the other option for Max. I mean he's got some good mates there now, isn't he? He's got Rob Marshall, he's got Pete Prod, and he's also, of course, getting GP there, who I think will become team principal, and he'll be pushing a lot for Max to go. So in some ways, it makes sense for him to go there. In others, you think, are they going to have customer engines always? Are they going to get? They're going to do something a bit differently on the power unit side. Does it really matter anyway if they have got customer engines? Does it? They won the championship last year. So yeah, I mean that's obviously a big thing for Max to consider as well. McLaren. I think personally, I think if it was one or the other, McLaren or Mercedes, with Kimi, I think he'd go with Mercedes, purely because it's just a guarantee that he's going to have a great race car for the next 10 years of his career, or however long he wants to race. And that guarantee isn't quite the same at McLaren. But then again, does he really want that guarantee? I don't know. Maybe he quite likes the challenge of being at McLaren. How would he compare against Lando? Well, Lando has, I would say, he's got really soft, supple inputs. I wouldn't have said his rates of input are as good as Max's rates of input in terms of being perfect harmony with the car. And as a result of that, I think Max is going to be much more able to deal with variables than Lando. It'll be as simple as that. I think on a new set of tires, perfect balance, there wouldn't be that much between Lando and Max. There isn't between Max and anyone. But as soon as the tires are going off, or you got a bit of understeer, or the track conditions change, or you got crosswind, or this or that, then Max will just disappear, in my opinion. Not disappear, but I mean he'll definitely be all over Lando in that area. Here's Debbie Maffio. Max ain't going anywhere. Just keeps whinging. Well, yeah, wouldn't you whinge if the car was that bad? What are you supposed to say? Oh, I'm totally happy with Red Bull. They're doing a great job. Shame about Silverstone, but we'll come back and we'll win the Belgian Grand Prix. I mean, you can't really do that. Nobody's going to believe that. And he's entitled to whinge a bit, I think. And because it's not, oh, if I do this, the team will respond. It's like, people asking me how I feel. This is how I feel. I would say the same thing. When the things start, mechanical things happen on the car that cause accidents, that's not good. You could say, well, they shouldn't have brought, maybe he should be spending all his time moaning about active arrow, but that's a problem because then you get F1 and the FIA, moaning about you. So he's just angry that he's got a difficult car to drive this year and not a very competitive car. It's very up and down. I think he's entitled to be angry. That's my opinion anyway. Max says Bruce McLaren, Chris Amon. Yeah, there you go. Dick Seaman, what a name. I had to look that up after you mentioned him. R.I.P. Sandwich. Yeah, Dick Seaman was definitely, if you think about what Lewis Hamilton did at Mercedes or at McLaren when he came in, and what he did for global acceptance and tolerance of different races and different colors, nations. Lewis has been brilliant. Dick Seaman, different times, but similarly a pioneer of what was achievable for an athlete Grand Prix driver, and mixed up completely, of course, in the whole build up to World War II and fascism and driving for a German team financed by Hitler, but did really well. He remained Dick Seaman, and he remained a very, very dignified British racing driver who stood up for freedom and what was right. And when he won the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, there was a lot of talk about whether or not he would give the Sieg Heil salute afterwards, and he doesn't. He does a sort of fairly cursory salute that definitely is not, you know, the Nazi salute, and all credit to him for that. And he did a great job. You know, he was an ambassador for the sport. He broke the ground on the new Crystal Palace circuit. He was covered in bandages from some shunt, and he turned up, and he was the guy that put the spade in. This is where we're going to create a new motor racing circuit just south of London. Dick Seaman. He was a big star, and it was very sad, very, very sad that he had that accident. It was wet. It was the 39 Belgian Grand Prix at Spa, as I say, and coming up to the La Source hairpin, he lost it in the wet, hit a tree, and the thing caught fire. And he was, yeah, ironically, like you know, the irony is just incredible. But that weekend, he was allowing a photographer to follow him around the scenes of the Belgian Grand Prix into his hotel room, pictures of him shaving, all these things, what it was like to be a Formula One driver. And so we have insight. If ever you read the George Monkhouse book on Mon Ami, on Dick Seaman, the letters of Dick Seaman, and they're just so so sad, because it's as if life will go on forever, and he's young and he's good looking and he's a British driver in the Mercedes Grand Prix team and he's winning races. And his dying words supposedly were, "Please tell my wife I won't be able to take her to the cinema on Monday." And it was, you know, different times, but we should never forget them. I'm finding a lot out about Max for all you good folk who no doubt follow him on whatever, or follow the stuff that Mac and Debbie Mafia. Max reckons that he doesn't need the fastest car to win. Wrong. Really? I don't think he's right there. Sorry, I don't think you're right there. I think he can win in without the fastest car. I think he's right. And with respect, Debbie Mafia, I think you're wrong, because there are circuits and conditions in which you can win if you don't have the best car. I mean, wasn't far away from winning Austria, and he certainly didn't have the best car there, that's for sure. And there will be opportunities again for Max to win Grand Prix this year. Sandwich, Max 100% does, like every champion has. Well, obviously, over a season, it's a different thing. You need to be in the best team, the best car to win a championship. No doubt about that. But I'm talking about race wins. You can definitely win if you don't have the best car. And we've seen many examples of that over the years. I suppose the most classic of all examples of that was Sterling Moss. The number of races he won, quite patently not in the best car. And we've seen, you know, plenty of examples of that in more recent times. Zishan Asfar, Peter, how important was the win for Charles at Silverstone? What do you think his future approach will be with his driving style? And do you think maintain the belief he will beat Lewis over the season? I don't think, funnily enough, I don't think it'll have that much impact on Charles. I think it'll just be like, oh, okay, back to normal now. Let's just enjoy and get on with it. Make the car a bit better, see what we can improve with the car, given the budget cap and where we're going with it. And hopefully we'll win some more races between now and the end of the year. I think it'll be that. I don't think he sits down and thinks, oh, I'm going to beat Lewis every race, any more than Lewis is thinking the same thing now, because they both won Grand Prix. That pressure is off Lewis, definitely. And Mac and Charles will think, all things being equal, I'll probably win, but I've got to be ready for Lewis to win some more races. I think it's like a breath of fresh air, this whole, both of them winning races, and just being able to now relax and focus on getting the best from everybody around them, getting the best from the engineers if they can, and trying to get the strategy perfect every race, all the things that go on, and enjoy life again. I think that's be more that than anything else. They're both, you know, pretty solid at Ferrari in terms of their futures. There's nothing, no stress anymore. It's just like, you know, let's go on. Debbie, have I got any comments about Aussie V8s? Absolutely not. Which is, I'm not saying that because I'm not interested in Aussie V8s. I'm actually punishing myself for yet again not doing enough with Cam Waters. I've got to make that happen, haven't I? Right. So no, the Aussie V8 series. I mean, I'm just basically, when you grew up in Australia in my era, you either played soccer or football, football being rugby union, and I played rugby union. And if you like motor racing, you either like single seaters, open wheelers, they were called actually, open wheelers or touring cars. And a lot of people like the touring cars. I was an open wheeler guy, always have been. Now these days, it's not quite as obvious the differences these days. There's a bit of mix and match going on, but in general, when I think about the Aussie V8 series, I always think of lost opportunities in America for single-seater open-wheeler racing. Formula 5000, Formula 5000 revivals, a good Formula 2 series. Single-seater racing for me ultimately is what it's all about. I know a lot of people would say, nah, no, 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 touring cars, mate. But that's the way I feel about it. Michelle Hoff one. Hi, Peter. What do you think of this carousel? Oscar to Red Bull, George to McLaren, Max to Mercedes. Yeah, I think that could happen. I think it's more likely that George would go to Red Bull. If Max went to Mercedes, I think George would go to Red Bull. I think if Red Bull had the choice of Oscar or, I mean, if that happened, then Oscar would still be at McLaren, wouldn't he? But if Oscar was available and George was available, I think Red Bull would go for George. I think they'd probably just think he was just, bit quicker, bit of a winner, wouldn't they? I'm not saying I agree with that, but I think that I'm pretty sure that's what Red Bull would do. Funny to see George in a Red Bull, wouldn't it? Just in terms of looking at him. Trail Break 3 has just said Henri Pescarolo. Yeah, well, that's in reference to Henri Pescarolo having that massive shunt at French Grand Prix 72 in practice. Not the only shunt he had at, I think he had about 4 big shunts in Frank's March 711 that year. And dark blue, lovely car. And this is 72. And I remember chatting to him after each shunt, and he was fine. He wasn't hurting any of them. He said, "Well, I was going down the hill, and the sun was in my eyes, and the car is destroyed." It was just like the car is destroyed. A lovely guy, Henri. Used to get on with him really well. Funny bloke, and he made a big impression on me, partly because I just love that bright green helmet against the bright blue of Matra. I thought it was such a great color combination. I love that. So thank you, Henri, for that lovely helmet color design. I mean, here we are talking about a helmet design from a driver from that period, and we can remember it perfectly because it was just Pescarolo green. Today, if you think about, oh, what about, I don't know, whoever, helmet design, let's take Oliver Behrman. Oh, what about his helmet design? Well, what is it? I have no idea. But you can remember Henri Pescarolo's, and that was a lovely thing. And then I don't know if how many people remember this, but I was actually at the 67 Monaco Grand Prix as a kid with my dad on a Page and Moy trip, and we watched practice in the F3 final from the chicane area, on the inside of the chicane, where I'm not sure you can watch from there anymore. And Pescarolo won the Formula 3 race in a Matra. Really impressive with that green helmet and the blue Matra. I was just absolutely blown away by how quick he was. Sandwich says Spa is my favorite track. AB Vespa, that's a good name. Hey, Peter, here, Albert from Holland. Hi there. A lot of critical team members left or will leave Red Bull. I don't hear much about high-class professionals who will instead join Red Bull. What's your opinion? Uh, yeah, well, yeah. What's my opinion there? I suppose all the key guys inevitably are always going to get offers to go to some of the newer, lesser teams on more money and more senior positions. And because Red Bull is still a very good race team with a lot of good people there. So because they're in trouble and they're not going very well, it's a prime moment for the other teams to come in and take the pick of the bunch in their opinion. So there's nothing unusual there. That's usually what happens when a team's doing a lot of winning and everything's going well. Usually the key people all remain because everybody loves the whole thing and everybody's got a few bonus money, points money and bonus money and stuff like that. But when it's not going well, the team is much more exposed and the good people do get plucked away. And no, we don't get to hear too much about who they're rehiring in their place. And this is all the behind the scenes stuff that we should have access to with the TV that I was mentioning earlier. And I would think Laurent Meki's probably quite good in that area, I would think, of recruiting good young people, maybe. I mean, it's a very departmentalized world now that you're looking at when it comes to engineering and design and all the different aspects of the car. It's very compartmentalized. And so to find specialists in that area, I guess, is not as difficult as it used to be. And so you can go out and do that. But yeah, not good times, that's for sure. Not good times for Red Bull. And, you know, I did say, I think it was after Canada in a live stream, that before we really judge where Red Bull are going and what Laurent Mekies is doing, we need to give them 3 or 4 races, I said. Well, Austria was the next race and they did pretty well. Silverstone's race after that, they did pretty badly. If you compound the failure, the DRS failure, with the erratic performance all weekend. And now we go to Spa. Now it could be the Spa will be wet and Max will win and everyone will say, oh, Red Bull, mega team. You know, that could quite happen. Red Bull is a good enough team to win at Spa in the wet. And Max, of course, could win in the wet in a Red Bull. But let's wait and see what happens. Sandwich oversteers like crazy, huh? So much opposite lock out of corners, must be so much fun. Yeah, that's the Lotus Elite. So it was. Horatio is, I think he's got a very good feel for the rates of input. He's got unbelievably good car control and reflexes, and that kind of dominates the way he drives, I think. And if, and he won't like me saying this, but if he was to soften up a fraction and just enjoy driving on his rates of input, he would be even better than he is. But he is, even as he is, he's phenomenally good. I mean, he definitely has the talent. I suppose his Formula One opportunities aren't going to happen, but he definitely has a talent to drive for any of the big hyper teams or whatever they're called, and for outright victory in WEC endurance events, for sure. The guy's that good. He's really good. Sounds amazing. Yes, that Climax engine. That was the other thing to, that was the other thing that we used to love, with the sounds of those Coventry Climax engines. And you really get a feel for that, I think, with the audio from that, with all the soundproofing trim taken out of the Elite. Probably not very much in there in the first place anyway. So, okay, steering wheel, constant corrections. Yeah. But another nice thing was that Lotus steering wheel, wasn't it, with the red rim? I hope they put glue the plastic Lotus badge into the middle of the wheel when they get back to Le Mans, because they always used to fall off Lotuses, but that's what it's supposed to have. Sandwich says constant corrections like that we're talking about, Horatio, were noticeable, well, not noticeable in real time. Nowadays, footage has to be slowed down unless the most keen aside. Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant that we see that and how much sliding is. Every time he's on the power, it's whoa, opposite lock. It's brilliant. Thanks for doing the stream. Says 250 years without the crown. Ah, okay. Yep, that's America's 250. Congrats to America on that. Always interesting and enjoyable. Yep, we can say that about America too, really. Max flash out 24 FPS versus 60. Yeah, exactly. Debbie Maffei, I went to my first in Melbourne 2022. Oh, great. Good to hear. Pity you never had a chance to go to Adelaide. I think you would have enjoyed that even more. It's a lovely circuit. So Marcos talking about merchandise. Peter, how about bring back flat out racing? Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Welcome to level one. That's another member just joined us. Thank you very much indeed. Resi Bro, very kind of you. Great to have you on board. So we've got a lot of questions and comments here. Trying to get through it all. Keep re-scrolling. Sandwich. Formula One currently only broadcasts at 50, but yeah, that does play a part. Oh, you're talking about the quality. Okay. Peter, if Jean Alesi, this is Generous Far, had chosen Williams instead of Ferrari in 91, could he have become a multiple world champion? I don't think he chose it. I think he suddenly didn't get the Williams offer that he thought he was entitled based on the contract that he'd signed with Frank, and it just didn't happen. So he went away and drove for Ferrari. Nigel returned to Williams on the basis that his teammate was going to be Riccardo Patrese. There was never any doubt about that. So, by the time Nigel was in the frame, Riccardo was the other driver. And I was at Ferrari at the time, all that was going on, although of course I was trying to help the Nigel deal happen with Frank, and shouldn't admit that really. And Riccardo was always the guy because he and Nigel got on really well. Would he have won multiple world championships? No, I don't think so. I don't think he was in Nigel's class in terms of, Jean Alesi was quick, but really could only drive one way, just a bit like Vettel, just sort of V corners, and didn't have much capacity for the variables or long radius corners. So, and needed a really good back end to do what he did well. But Nigel was in a different class, so he would never have he'd never had Nigel. And then I doubt he would have had Prost in 93 either. So I don't think he would have been, no. Jason Joe Lebbett says, how difficult would it be to reduce the size of Formula One cars to make them 20% narrower and shorter while keeping safety intact? It's a good question. And obviously I'm not technical enough in terms of crash structures to know if taking 20% out of the width and length would really affect the strength of the crash structures that we now have on the car. I can't tell you that. When you say keep safety intact, that is what you're talking about, the crash structures of the car, which indeed is one of the reasons the cars are quite bloated because of all the crash structures. So if you took 20% out of the car, my gut feeling is it would be a problem now to get the crash structures at the level we have them. So I think there is a move afoot to try and make the cars a bit smaller, but all you can really do is start reducing track or maybe wheelbase lengths. I doubt they'll start playing around with the chassis in terms of crash structures because you never want to go backwards on safety. So they're kind of where they are, I think. Rouen Les Essarts, yeah, well, there's another great circuit pointed out by Peter Nikolov, host of the French Grand Prix, which very fast downhill section, very fast uphill section with the Nouveau Monde hairpin right in the middle of it, where I famously watched with Peter Collins in '73, Larry Perkins beating all the French Formula 3 runners like Depailler, Jabouille and Lafitte. And we were cheering uniquely for Larry Perkins and his Ralt or GRD maybe, can't remember now. And Larry setting up the car by sort of jumping on one corner of the chassis. Really, really good engineer driver, Larry. Great guy. Yeah, Rouen, great track where we lost Jerry Birrell and Jean-Luc Salomon, Dennis Dayon. Very dangerous, very fast. Nearly lost Jackie Oliver there, 68 practice, big shunt. And of course, Joe Schlesser as well in the 68 French Grand Prix down the hill. Dangerous circuit, dangerous circuit. So I remember interviewing Jean-Eric Verne once and saying to Jean, where do you come from in France? And he said, oh, I'm very near Rouen. I said, oh, wow, Rouen, what do you think of the old Grand Prix circuit there? And he said, Grand Prix circuit? Where? I don't know. I do not know. Is it a track? Where? I said, what's it? Rouen. Rouen, where you're from? Oh, no, I've never seen this. That was a bit odd. Anyway, film versus digital. Yeah, well. Or telemetry versus, real life. I was watching the live from the range, the Open Golf yesterday, and one of the pundits came out with quite a good. They were watching Bryson DeChambeau, who's everything is data with DeChambeau. You know, he hits the ball for 3 seconds. He looks at it, the flight, and then he's immediately down studying the data of the flight, the club head speed, the apex, the whole thing. Everything's data driven with Bryson. And he was saying he was very good actually. I think this applies to Formula One. He said, well, he said data's a bit like fire, isn't it? You know, fire is very useful if you want to cook your food and eat your meat nicely cooked. But equally, if you misuse it, it can blow the whole house up. And I thought, well, that's about right with data in Formula One as well. You can use far too much data and you can get yourself completely crossed up. As I think that's what's happened, I think, to Oscar Piastri at McLaren. I think he's lost his, and Daniel Ricciardo, it happened to him as well. I think they've lost their ability just to be flair driven racing drivers and to respond to the moment. And they're far too straitjacketed into the telemetry world of this is what Lando's doing, this is what you're doing, opportunity, get on the power slightly quicker here, opportunity, brake slightly later there. You know, they always precede it with this opportunity thing at McLaren. And I just think, let the guy drive the car. Stop faffing around with all this data. And you'll get much more from a driver like Piastri. Other drivers, it wouldn't necessarily work. Nico Rosberg, very good example of a driver like Bryson DeChambeau as a golfer, very data driven. But not all drivers are the same. And I think engineers often assume that they are all the same. And because they're engineers, they only think that way. They think one dimensionally about data and how important it is. They never think about flair. Is the best way to describe thinking on your feet or feeling the car at the seat of your pants. Jack Brabham like. Right. Just checking these super chats. That's all good. Right. Now, next one. Wow, so many questions. I'm going to have to another precursor. I'm not going to be able to get through them all, guys. I'm so sorry. It's flattering and wonderful that there are so many questions. And here I am doing this one live stream before we get into the Belgian Grand Prix next weekend or this weekend. So maybe we should be doing two sometimes a week because there's so many good questions. Peter from Oscar Beckalou. What is your favorite moment from when you were doing the post-race interviews? It was usually whenever Kimi was in the top three, he always came straight from the podium to the interview room. And the other drivers always, whether it be Fernando, whether it be Montoya, Michael, Rubens, would always spend more time chatting to people on the way from the podium to the interview room and getting a towel and another towel and doing this and making sure, and then talking to the media girl who had the cap and this and that. Whereas Kimi would just come straight down and slump down in the chair. And there would be the cameraman behind me. There'd be me sitting in the chair and there'd be Kimi facing me, sort of slumped there in his soaking wet underwear. And I would say, I'd say to Kimi, yeah, if he'd won the race, I'd say, oh, that went well, Kimi. And he'd say, yeah, good win. And I'd say, so what are you going to do tonight? Oh, I don't know. I hate Formula One. It'd be like this. We'd have a conversation. So I used to look forward to all those Kimi moments more than anything else, really. Ah, yeah, Kimi's in the top three. Great. I'll have a good chat to Kimi. A good chat involved about 5 words, you know, but we'd have a laugh. Beyond that, I suppose it was, I quite enjoyed, retrospectively, I think I enjoyed the sort of skirmishes with Michael, in which he would always think it was a victory for him if he could give me a 1-word answer to anything, because that's how he was. You know, he knew then that he's one up on me, and it made me feel embarrassed that I hadn't asked a decent question. So I was always trying to phrase the question in a way that it was impossible for him to give a 1-word answer like yes or no or I don't know. So that was quite good. And there were a couple of times when Michael would say something a bit disingenuous. And even though the director was in my ear saying, move on, I would say, well, what do you mean by that, Michael? And then he'd have to explain it to me, which really annoyed him. And then he'd get up and he'd sort of do that to me as he walked out of the interview room. I quite enjoyed those moments too. Enjoyed in a true sense of the word, and that both of us would have a laugh about it later. Rubens was always good as well. And I always used to love getting Rubens fired up about the emotion of the day and where he came from, Vauxhall Lotus, and especially when he won his first Grand Prix, he loved all that. Yeah, good times. Fernando. So, Fernando, what do you think about Michael crashing at La Rescas like that, the closing minutes of qualifying? Brilliant. Pares Karadesh. Hey, Peter, when Michael Schumacher tested the 95 Ferrari, he said that I could have won the championship with that car. Why did Ferrari move to V10 for 96 instead of V12? Did they? I don't know. I guess fuel size, tank size, less fuel consumption. Wouldn't it have been that? I can't imagine anything else. It usually was. And that was usually the downfall of 12s, wasn't it? With Honda, it was the downfall of the 12. So I guess it was that. Yeah, I think it was that. I'm not doing very well on that one. I can't really remember that, to be honest. Anyway, all I can say is 12s usually use more fuel than 10s. Sandwich 1597. Peter, who's your favorite driver of all time? Oh, Jim Clark. Absolutely. Because he's still a mystery, really, like James Dean. He died young, obviously. And so nobody ever really got to know the real Jim Clark. So there's that mystery factor around him. Even Jackie Stewart never really knew the real Jim Clark. John Whitmore, no. Uh, and he was so good in every type of car, in every condition. And he was a gentleman, and he was humble, and he was kind. He's just a lovely person, but he was dead cool as well. He was dead cool. I mean, Jim Clark, have a look after this live stream, if you can, at Jim Clark sitting in the new Lotus 25 with the top cockpit section off before the 62 Dutch Grand Prix or Belgian Grand Prix, did the same thing. And just think, there is a very, very cool racing driver in a beautiful Grand Prix car. I mean, you can't think anything else when you look at Jim Clark. Even the name. I mean, Sterling always said, if I'd been christened Hamish, I probably wouldn't have been very successful. If Jim Clark had been christened Hamish, he probably wouldn't have been as successful either. But I do still have one of the only actual signed autographs, no, sorry, signed signatures. It's not an autograph because it's on a receipt, an RSVP to a function in 1957, where Jim Clark signs his name, James Clark Jr. Not many of those around. So he was actually named after his dad, of course. Max says Ollie Berman drove Ayrton Senna's legendary 85 Lotus 9070T at Silverstone. That was cool. Yeah, it would have been. I'm glad he did that too, because he would have given it some stick, knowing Ollie, and he would have driven it well. Got a big right foot. He's not afraid to get the old opposite lock going. So, Debbie says V8 Supercars, great series. Yep, no doubt it is. Johnny, which track would you remove from the calendar, and with which one would you replace it? Oh, I'd remove one of those Middle Eastern DRS, triple DRS tracks. And what are we talking about? Saudi Arabia, I guess. And I'd replace it with, I keep saying it, I'll replace it with Sepang, Malaysia. Great track, great city, great everything. Why isn't that on the calendar? It's ridiculous. And it's just there. But I mean, I'd love to see races in South Africa. I'd like to see a race in more races in South America. I'd like to see the German Grand Prix and the French Grand Prix back on the calendar. I'd like to see a race in India. I'd like to see more races in Asia, Thailand, Vietnam, whatever. So there's so many areas that we're not using in Formula One, and we're sort of focusing on America all the time. And that's okay in itself, but there are a lot of countries out there that deserve a Grand Prix and should have a Grand Prix in a true, proper Formula One World Championship. Speaking of which, I was very impressed to see that Tatiana Calderon won a race, some sort of GT race, endurance race thing in Guyana, on the north, slightly northeast coast of South America last weekend on the South Dakota circuit, which apparently I looked it up on Wikipedia. It's been around since '53, apparently, but it's a racetrack there. And she won it. And all credit to Tatiana because I know there's so much emphasis now on the academy and girls and ladies coming into racing and making it, giving them some sort of path on which they can do that. But we need to take our hat off, I think, to women out there racing in, men's categories, if that's the right way of phrasing it, and doing well and going and showing their pace against, real opposition. And she did that. She won that endurance race. Brilliant. Good on her. Congratulations to her. And she's done well. She's done Formula 3. She's done Japanese Super Formula. She's done a bit of IndyCar, I think, or something like that. Bit of NASCAR, Brazilian NASCAR. She's great. She's out there trying everything, and she should be given a lot of credit for that, in my opinion. Sandwich, Madring, like how we say Madrid, and not really an emphasis on the A in Madrid. Yeah, but they should have thought about that when they called it the Madring, because a lot of people won't be thinking about dropping the A because the English people will see that as the Madring. Of course, the Madring, you can say that, but they should have thought of it because a lot of people, you think Americans are going to call it the Madring? They're going to call it the Madring, aren't they? And it's a bit like when Ron Tornak and Jack Brabham started their enterprise, and they called it Motor Racing Developments, which became shortened to MRD. But then they realized that in France that would be pronounced MERD. And we know what MERD means in France. And if you don't, you can go and look it up. So they thought, oh, well, we won't call it MRD anymore. We'll call it Brabham. You make adjustments. And I think in this case, Mad Ring, they should think, well, it's not going to sit that well with the American crowds. We should rethink that one. Red Bull by 2 teams cheating. Really? You don't seem very positive about Max and Red Bull there. What's going on? Ferrari has sister team Haas, so it's not only Red Bull. I'd love to see the current Formula One drivers racing classics instead of the Lego cars. Absolutely. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't we all? What's that Lego thing all about? It wasn't a race, was it? It was ridiculous. Where are we? Yeah, they should be in classics, and they should be in normal races as well. Look how many people went to see Max in that GT3 race at the Nürburgring. Why is Charles Leclerc not doing something now at Monza, some endurance race or somewhere else? Why isn't Lewis doing a round of the British Touring Car Championship? Why isn't, Kimi Antonelli doing something? We all want to see these guys out there. Or go back to Peter Windsor's original concept, which is that the fans are given the opportunity to actually sit next to these drivers on a Grand Prix circuit on a regular basis. That's what we should be doing. Pater Nikolov, Red Bull Ring, Westschleifer, Old Österreich Ring. Why not again? Prince Bira, born on this day. Ah, was he? Good. Prince Bira. Yeah, he was a very wealthy Thai prince, but he spent his money well, i.e. on motor racing, and did very well. He was a fast driver, very well, and used to take a little terrier with him to most of the races. And very sadly passed away in Barons Court Tube Station in West London. They found this poor person lying there, and it was 2 or 3 days before he was identified. He didn't finish his life with his wealth and his stature. Very sad ending, but wonderful guy, wonderful driver, very fast in his day, and happy birthday to him, to his memory. Right. So there's a bit of a chit chat going on here between a lot of you, I think. Not quite sure what's going on. Mac Hand 65 Peter, can you tell us more about Fangio versus Moss? Interestingly, although Moss was significantly better outside Formula One, Fangio had the edge when teammates in Formula One. Did the rigs or Formula One car make a difference? You say Fangio had the edge in Formula One. I mean, the only real comparison was 55, obviously. And that year, Sterling went to Mercedes. As Kimi, I guess, went to Mercedes alongside George Russell, thinking this is the king. Well, maybe not. I think maybe Sterling had much more reverence for Fangio than Kimi ever did for George, but because by then, of course, Fangio had won the world championship in 1951, 50, and 54, so he had two world championships behind him. So he was joining this double world champion in the factory Mercedes team, which Fangio knew well, which Sterling was completely new to, having only really raced his own privately entered cars up until that point, and was just blown away by the organization and the systems at Mercedes. And there was Fangio, the double world champion, and I think. Yeah, I think the reality is that Sterling was shockingly quick and very near Fangio from day one. And then he beat him at the British Grand Prix. So I don't see that Fangio had the edge over Sterling in 55. I think, given from where Sterling was coming, Sterling was, this guy was unbelievably good. And I think Fangio sensed that. Fangio didn't need that to know how good Sterling was anyway. And then, of course, yeah, you put Sterling in the SLR and the sports car, the Mille Miglia that year, which he wins, obviously, for Mercedes, one of the greatest of all Mille Miglia wins. And you look at all his other feats in sports cars up until that point and everything else he was doing. And I don't think, I mean, there's a bit of a cliche about Fangio wasn't as good in sports cars as Sterling Moss. I'm not sure that was the case. I think Fangio was at a slightly different point of his career. I mean, Fangio's career was blighted by World War II. And he spent, well, a good 5 years, probably at least, going nowhere in Argentina whilst the war took place. And that's a big chunk out of your life and your career. And Fangio, I think 52, he had that enormous shunt at Monza when he'd driven from Dundrod, I think, through the night to get to this race in Italy. And he was just dog tired and crashed. And I think that had quite a big impression on Fangio, that he should limit as much as possible his extracurricular racing and focus on Formula One. But Sterling never really, well, Sterling for sure, never ever went down that path. He was always happy to race with the right team, the right car in any event, providing didn't clash with anything. So there was that as well. And I think when you judge Fangio in sports cars, he was very, very good as well. Very good. I mean, was it Christianstad? I think they were very closely together at Christianstad in the sports car race after Le Mans, before the British Grand Prix. So I would say Sterling in 55 was not in any way overshadowed by Fangio. And I think equally, I think we need to judge Fangio's sports car exploits with some, you know, some intelligence, because he was good. He was very good in sports cars, and they got on well. I mean, they got on well in such a way that we wouldn't see today, which was that Sterling was always in awe of Fangio and always said he was the best driver. I was not in the same class. He didn't say I wasn't in the same class, but he always said Fangio was the better driver. And I had many conversations, as did Nigel Roebuck and many of my friends, with Sterling about that 55 British Grand Prix and whether or not Fangio gave the win to Sterling or whether Sterling actually won it. And we're all of the opinion that Sterling won it and Fangio made a small mistake under pressure. And Sterling was the only one that said, no, 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 Fangio did that deliberately. He let me win. Not many drivers would think that way, but that's the way Sterling thought about Fangio. So it was an unusual relationship, but there was enormous respect, mutual respect between the two of them. They would never say a bad word about one another, and their faces would light up when they saw one another long after their careers were over. So it was a very special relationship of the type I don't think you could ever say existed between two other drivers. I can't think of another relationship like that, where a driver as brilliant as Moss was in complete awe of another driver called Juan Manuel Fangio. Actually, on that subject, I may be wrong here, but I think, oh no, I forgot to do it. But Martin Tomlinson actually sent me a picture of the autograph he got from Fangio. I don't think he got it on that 56 British Grand Prix day, but he definitely got Fangio's autograph a few years later. So where are we going now? Neil Williams says, wasn't it great to see Leclerc back in form at Silverstone? He's sublime when he's happy with the car, and I hope to see that level more often. Thoughts? Yeah, I mean, I've always said he's one of the top three and top four now, probably, and if you include Lewis again, and lovely to see. I've always loved watching Charles drive, and I've always respected his self-criticism and openness when describing his own mistakes and shortcomings. He's very, very good like that. And he's never lost that. That's one of the reasons he's got it back. And I think we all had faith that he would. So good to see. He is sublime to watch, and he is very, very good. Trailbreak 3 says Rwanda is aiming to host an F1 Grand Prix in 29. Good. Well, there you go. There should be more. Resi Bro, hi there again, Mr. Windsor. Really loved your chat about Frank Matic last midweek live stream. Found a few photos his son commented on the back, but total garage working on a Lotus. Wow. Yeah. I mean, don't talk about those days easy, because it doesn't make me sad. I'm just so nostalgic for those days. I was such an impressionable age, and it was Sydney. It was always good weather, and I never got my dad never took me to the Punch Bowl garage where Frank Matic kept his cars. I don't know why. But I don't know, he always had other things to do. But I would love to have gone to that garage and seen Frank Matic working on it. But I had the next best thing. You know, I could go to Catalina Park or Warwick Farm, and I could walk into the paddock, and I could see the total team flags flying. And I would know that that's where the Frank Matic and the Leo Gagan and the Ian Gagan cars would be. And if I stood there, I would see Frank Matic, and I'd see his Elfin, and I'd see his Lotus 19 or whatever it was. And those days just were, I just, that magic. I've never recreated that magic. The total team, the colors, the blue, white, red, the blue overalls of Frank Matic, slightly baggy, blowing, fluttering in the breeze, the turbulence of the race cars, and Frank just incredibly fast. Beautiful cars. Those red Elfins, Formula Junior cars, the Elfin Clubman, a bit like a Lotus 7, the Lotus 19, first in BRP lime green and then in the light blue. And imagine how that light blue Lotus 19 looked with the blue, white, and red total stripes down the middle. What a car. Resi says Cam Waters has been back to the top of the grid this year, finally. Great to see a great racing driver doing well. Talking about great racing drivers, your thought on Shane van Gisbergen? Yeah, I don't know much about him, but he's obviously very good. Very pleased that he's doing well. And yeah, I mean, Aussie V8s obviously produces a very high level of performance. James Courtney used to be outstandingly good in Formula 3 and on the route to Formula 1. I think would have been a very quick Formula 1 driver, but it all went wrong with that shunt at Monza when Nicky was running the car, the Jaguar. But that just shows, and then he went back to, and he did very well, didn't he, in V8s, and then it all, not as competitive an operation these days, but very high standard of driving there, no doubt. Just Lost in Space says Formula One has sterilized itself so much that only rain can now throw up unpredictable results. No more engines blowing up or running out of fuel, or driver mistakes punished by gravel traps. Well, we've had a few engines, not engines blowing up. We've had a few engines stopping. Quite why they stopped, we're never told, because we're not allowed to know about the technology. But actually, there's more unreliability and unpredictability in that sense than we've had in Formula One for quite a long time. I mean, when was the last time we had a guy like Antonelli looking as about to win a Grand Prix and something like that breaking on a Mercedes? Doesn't happen very often, does it? So yeah, is it sterilized? Yeah, I mean, drivers do go off, and we saw George Russell going off quite a big way in practice, qualifying actually, wasn't it? And just not hitting anything at all, and continuing. I mean, that shunt was probably how George went off and the amount of ground he covered, for sure, a lot more than Tony Brooks with that BRM in 1959. But because it was a grass verge, the tire dug in, rolled the car, Tony was thrown out, and the whole car exploded in flames. So that's the difference. Resi Bro 9783. You mentioned a video of the most underrated drivers that never made it to Formula One. Is there somewhere I can watch this video? I can't seem to find it on your channel. It's a very good point. I need to look for that one. I did it with Ian Titchmarsh and Rob Wilson, I think. And I had a lot of fun with it. I'll look for that. And if it's not on the channel, I'll upload it. But speaking of that, I think there are a lot of videos on my channel that are currently listed as private or unlisted or something. And that's not because I've done that. It's because there was some glitch with my YouTube channel about 3 years ago now. And the whole channel basically shut down. It was some virus. And when YouTube solved the problem and got it all going again, what they didn't notice was that one of the effects of the virus is that it made 80% of my videos go from public to unlisted. So bottom line is, I suppose I could spend the next 3.5 weeks, 24/7, going through every video and making it public again. And I suppose that's what I should do at some point. But yeah, I'll look for this one. Max Flashart says, I don't want to see the telemetry of my life. My race engineer and team principal would be wild at me. Oh, and strategy will be livid. LOL. Data versus feel, flair, and confidence. Yeah. Will Ferrari have any chance to win on Spa? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course they will, especially if the weather can be a bit dodgy. I'm not sure what the forecasts are at the moment, but it's not much point looking because it's such a microclimate there. But yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine that Ferrari, contrary to everybody else in the world, I seem to be the only person that thinks that Ferrari's engine has actually improved it's improved relative to Mercedes since Mercedes have had the compression ratio reboot. And I think Ferrari have got a good engine now. So I think they'll go quite well at Spa. Not that Spa is just about engines. It's quite an interesting circuit in that sense, because if you're very quick on sector 2, in other words, if you have a lot of inherent downforce and you're running a little bit downforce on top of that, and you do very quick sector 2, you can actually hold that over the lap and get a pretty good lap time in, even if in the race it won't be brilliant. So you'll probably get Red Bull will probably be doing that sort of thing, I would imagine. And then you've got Mercedes and Ferrari. And I think McLaren will do what I just described, sector 2, but sectors 1 and 3 will be more Mercedes and Ferrari, which will put them in slightly better shape for the race. NMTCG says, Peter, when you adjust your mic, don't close it from the foam as it sounds bad. Do it from the base. Love your chat. Make it closer. Okay, all right. Yeah, like that. Yeah, good point. I'm still not happy, I got to say, with my audio because it's not loud enough. And I make it any louder than this, it will start to distort. And I've tried a new cable, I've tried various other settings, and it's still, that's why I keep playing with it, because I want to make sure it's as near to my mouth as possible. But good point. Yeah, I must play with it like that, not with the foam. Thank you very much. Unaccustomed as I am to these technical challenges. Right. JPS78MA says, hi, Peter, your data story reminds me of the putting expression, analysis leads to paralysis. Yeah. Shame I didn't get my questions earlier. Haha. Yeah, I say that to Jack, who's improving by the day with his golf. And I say to him a couple of times, if you're standing over the ball a little bit longer than feels right, and you've still got a few thoughts going on in your head, swing thoughts, step away and start again, because you don't want to spend too much time in the address position before you hit the ball. You want it to be all fairly seamless and smooth. And inevitably, waiting too long and while you're thinking of this and thinking of that makes things a little bit more edgy. It's one of the things we're working on, actually. Jules Clark says, Peter question, what have you learned about driving while driving a Formula One drivers on the road? Yeah, clutch take up. This is a manual car, obviously. No lumps or bumps in gear changing up or down. Clutch take up when you're starting. Just the right amount of revs. Never have more revs than you need just to get the car moving nicely. Heel and towing. Make sure you just have the toe exactly perfectly on the brake so you can just dab the throttle correctly. Steering. Never all the very good Formula One drivers that I've sat next to in a road car always have exactly the right amount of steering they need for the radius that they've decided to take for that little bit of corner, whether it be on a motorway, whether it be on a tight corner. And if there are seams in the road and the road has got a curve on it, never go over the seams parallel to the radius of the corner. Go over the seams as squarely as you can go over the seams so that it's junjung and not jujujung. You only feel one lump at the front, one at the back, and it's not on a twist, if you see what I mean. It's all about not having lumps or bumps in anything you do. When you brake and come to a halt, always come out of the brakes at the last millisecond to make sure the car just stops of its own volition rather than on the pedal. So it's never one of those. Never. I've never been with a good driver who's ever done that. They always just stop and the car just stops, comes to a halt smoothly. And throttle progression as well. Never, you never do the throttle in bursts. Everything is always very, very, very linear. Any good driver I've been with will always be like that. So yeah, none of which I've been able to achieve very well on a consistent basis, but they're the things that I've always learnt and always try to bring into road driving. Max says, oh, he's talking to Resi Bro. Super chats always work if that works for you. I'm not in that position, but I would recommend, or at the next live stream, try to get it as soon as possible. Eileen Beardsley, I love your live videos, Peter, but I'm tired, so I had to turn off. Haha. Okay, great. Thank you very much and have a good sleep. Mouse down. Rumours of Max joining McLaren, yet Max openly criticised him last year on several decisions. Mercedes unlikely. Toto loves these regs. I fear Max doesn't fit in the culture of other big teams. I don't think that'd be a reason that he wouldn't go to Merck. I think if Toto said to Max, I'm not saying Max would do this, but if Toto said to Max, we like these regs, Max, because we actually do a better job with them. We've got a better engine, better car, and we understand how to do it, and we're going to get better all the time. And very rare will be the occasions when we won't have a super quick car at every Grand Prix. And we'd love you to drive for us in those circumstances. I can't imagine Max saying, oh, I hate these rigs. I'm not going to drive for you then. I hate these rigs. He'd say, oh, wow, yeah, okay. Sounds good. Wouldn't he? I think he would. Right. Yeah. So Eileen, just so you know, it was 10:30 in New Zealand. I noticed the video quality is terrible. Really? I hate to pass the buck, but I think that's going to be your internet connection because I've been watching. I've got my iPad here, which is the stream that's going out, and I keep thinking, wow, the video quality is amazing. So it hasn't glitched once in terms of the picture, and I hope the sound is good. So I think that's going to be internet, sadly. Right. What are we doing? More questions? We're going to have to wind it up soon, guys, aren't we? What are we doing? Low fan turnout, Sepang and Turkey. Yeah, that was when I was talking about Sepang and Turkey as being great circuits. Yeah, absolutely right. But then again, and since when has fan turnout at a race been a part of the business model? Never, as far as I know. And I always laugh when they say, oh, 450,000 spectators over 3 days or whatever Grand Prix it is. And I mean, how much money does that make for Formula One? Nothing. It's all about TV rights, and nothing has changed. The business model that Liberty are running is exactly the business model that Bernie Ecclestone created, and that business model is based on TV rights and TV viewing figures around the world. And that generates sponsorship, that generates a million other things. But fans at the racetrack, as much as the atmosphere is great and it may add to the whole feel of the weekend, it's a pittance compared with anything else. And so that's why Bernie did these races in the middle of nowhere, because it didn't matter if the grandstands were empty. That's why he had all the colored seats in China, to make it look as if the grandstands were full. Formula One was the first sport to do that, as far as I know. So I think everybody's got lulled into this thing. Oh, you got to have the big fan engagement. And why? Okay, merchandising, but people are going to buy merchandising anyway. And there's a lot of stuff about the show and all the other extracurricular activities. That's fine as well, but it's not part of the business model. So yeah, I still think bring back Sepang and Turkey, even if there are no spectators. Great racetracks. Extreme BHP says, I really hope Formula One takes note of Max's incidents around active aero. The last thing we want is someone getting hurt. I think they should rather explore flexi wings. Yeah, well, I mean, and Mark Slade made the point, didn't he, that only Mercedes and now Mercedes and Aston Martin and subsequently Alpine and Williams have got their elements mounted on the center element on the front, on the nose box, as distinct from everybody else is running it on the front. And that limits what they can do with flexibility and how they can tune the car for high-speed understeer. And that's one of the reasons, I guess, that they faff around with active aero, because they've got to do other stuff. And I agree with you. I can't stand active aero. It gives me the willies, and I'm not into it at all. And I don't even want to think about the repercussions if there is a shunt, particularly somewhere like Spa. One of the greatest races, says Jim Dillinger, was at Donington Park 93. Why did they never return? Well, it's interesting you say that, because a lot of people would say great races have to have massive number of overtakes, or the first two separated by 0.001 of a second. Of course, this was a Ayrton masterclass in the wet, so people call it a great race. I have no opinion either way. I like all three, and I thought Ayrton drove beautifully that day. Obviously, I don't mean that in a condescending way. It was a great win. But why didn't they return? Purely money, because Donington didn't have the money that Silverstone, that Bernie was trying to get out of Silverstone. And the only way he got that money out of Silverstone was to put on the race on at Donington and scare them. So that's what that was all about. Long term, Silverstone were always going to be more able to finance Formula One the way Bernie wanted Formula One to be financed. Reezy Bro has just given a very nice comment to Max Flash Up, but I'm not going to read it out because it's too embarrassing. And the same Max's reply is very embarrassing as well, so I'm not going to go for that one. But thank you very much, both of you, for your kind words. Right. So Reezy Bro, I've actually answered Reezy Bro, haven't I? Yeah, I think I have. Jim Dillinger says, Sterling wrote a book about Fangio. I have a signed copy. Yeah, well, Sterling ghosted many books, and they're all very good. Most of them written by Ken Gregory, his manager, who also wrote his own book called Behind the Scenes of International Motor Racing. And if you haven't read that book, please get a copy. Behind the Scenes of International Motor Racing by Ken Gregory. It's one of the best motor racing books ever written. I loved it. Shakaka says, hi, Peter. I really want to see Max at Mercedes because, to be honest, I'm not sure if anyone can beat Kimi in that car apart from Max. What do you think would happen? Oh, I think it'd be good. I think it'd be very close. I think it'd be very close. It'd be amazing because Max would be in a different phase of his career, obviously, from the young, hungry guy that he was when he joined Red Bull. And now he's going to Mercedes, and there's somebody super quick in the other car who drives the same way as he does, but he's a young guy, as hungry as Max, even if he's just won the world championship. And so, yeah, it would be fascinating to see how they get on. Absolutely fascinating. I'd love to see it. And as I say, I think Max, normally up until now, Max would have said, you know, if he'd been at Red Bull and they'd said, oh, we want to hire George Russell in the other car, or we want to get Charles Leclerc, Max would have said, I'd rather Perez or Liam Lawson, thank you. But now I think at this stage of his career, I think Max would love, he would probably love the challenge of racing somebody super quick like Antonelli in the other car, different stage of his career, and then beating him and winning that world championship. Hi, Peter. Hope you're well. What does Russell need to do to beat Kimi to the title? So far, I look at Russell. Do I have any answers apart from pathetic excuses? Ah, poor George. He's not bad, George. Don't underrate him. And he's still quite capable, thank you very much, of winning the world championship this year. And he could well do so. He just needs to not panic. I think it's it's long past the day when he could start doing what Kimi does in the car. So he has to focus on what George, does very well and keep doing that. He's a hard, fast racing driver. He's pretty good at strategy calls on the fly. And he's pretty good at getting the best from the team around him and getting the car somewhere near his liking and get on with it. Not think about Kimi, not think about anything. Don't think about the championship. Just enjoy every race and get on with it and race hard. That's the only way I think George can approach the rest of the year. And he's in a very good racing car, very good team, and he's still got half a chance, more than half a chance of winning the world championship. Jim Dillinger says, yeah, Fangio was kidnapped by Castro in Cuba. He missed the race, but enjoyed his captivity. Absolutely, he was kidnapped in Cuba. I think they made a film about it, didn't they? Certainly a book. And it's, yeah, Fangio. Amazing, yeah? Those days in Cuba. Talk about a romantic side of motor racing. The only Chris Welch says, I think Hamilton got a shot at the title. If the Mercedes issues continue, whether that car's issues or them taking points from each other due to wheel bashing, I still think it'll be Kimi or George, though. Yeah, of course, Lewis won't be thinking too much about the championship, but he'll definitely be thinking, I'm very happy with life right now. I'm up there with Charles. He's won a race. I won a race. On a good day, I'll be ahead of him. On a slightly less day, I'll be right with him. It's very different from where I was last year. I'm at Ferrari. England are doing well in the World Cup. He'll be absolutely delighted with life, I think. And he'll just be relaxed and driving well as a result. The only Chris Welch says, Max at McLaren, he will soon break the happy, happy mentality over there. I don't think he will. I think Max will, if he goes to McLaren, I think he'll really get into it. And he'll love the whole Zach, you know, put on the reggae music and sit around the campfire stuff. Not that he'll do that himself, but he won't be against it. He won't change it. And there'll be Rob there and there'll be, you know, GP there. And he'll, you know, if he goes to McLaren, he'll make it work. Definitely. And he'll be good there. And he'll be great for the team. And he'll definitely help the team. Definitely. Probably be more advantageous for McLaren than it will be for Max, actually. But anyway, that's just me. Reezy Bro. Thank you, Peter, and thank you for taking the time to look at that video. Well, you mean the video of Horatio driving the Elite? Yeah, no problem at all. So, what's happening? His answers are warming to a racer's heart. Come on now. I don't know if you're talking about me, but anyway, let's get to some other. ISF Tish says, I really hate how Formula One's become a race of battery boost. I miss the days where the measure of ability is how drivers can find extra time in the corners or exits and not lose the lead by battery. Here. So go to my merchandise store and 60/40 is not enough is one of them. You know, make corners great again is another. Bring back V8s is a third. What more can we do? You know, the more people that say that, the more Formula One might take notice. Thank you, Max, for your hit the like button request. Thank you very much. Peter Nikolov, Fangio nearly gave up racing after a crash in Argentina that killed his navigator. Kili Varzi was the driver to whom we owe Fangio's comeback. Fangio said that Varzi meant, absolutely. He drove for Team Varzi when he first came over to Europe. And Kili Varzi was total believer in Fangio. And we owe a lot to him. It's incredible, isn't it? We have this image of Varzi being this steely, morphine addicted, super quick racing driver. But there he was with a heart of gold, and he was adored by the Argentine fans as a result. And I've got the old magazine, the sports magazine El Gráfico, many old copies with Varzi on the front cover. You know, the hero of Argentina because of what he's doing with Fangio and Fangio Racing with the Varzi logo. Brilliant, great, great times, great era of motor racing. When you think about Varzi, Nuvolari, Campari, Antonio Ascari, all those guys, different times, weren't they? But very steely. Um, right. He returned to the Scuderia Varzi team. As far as I know, he and the team are living in the late Varzi's house. Well, I don't know about that, but could well be. Amazing. Resi Bro says, what is it about tracks that young drivers drive on that cultivate great driving? I've heard that this is one of the reasons behind some great Kiwi drivers. Is that the case? Kiwi, New Zealand and Finland are the two countries, Australia really as well, I suppose you got to include, that belie their population and the number of great Grand Prix drivers they've produced over the years. And in the days of Jack Brabham and the Australians that followed in his footsteps, whether it be Frank Gardner, Paul Hawkins, and then later on, obviously, Alan Jones and Mark Webber and Danny and the others, or whether it be New Zealand, the whole thing starting with Bruce. I mean, Bruce wouldn't have had the foot in the door that he had in Europe if Jack hadn't come over. So it really started with Jack and Bruce as a tandem, both playing their roles, particularly with the growth of Cooper as well. And without Jack and Bruce, would Cooper have won the World Championship in 59 and 60? I doubt it, because it was Jack and Bruce that engineered a lot of what we saw there. Yes, the rear engine concept was John and Charles Cooper based on necessity with their Formula 3 car. But the climax engine was, a lot of that was Jack Brabham with Wally Hassan and Leonard Lee. And Bruce after that. And Bruce building the Coopers as well, and the gearbox development that Jack did with the VW gearbox, things like that. And so there was that image of Bruce and Jack, because it was necessity in those days, that not only were they racing drivers, but they were engineer racing drivers. And then people used to say, oh, well, you know, the best mechanics are all from Australia and New Zealand because they just get on with it. And if they haven't got the right part, they just make it. And if they haven't got the right tool, they mess up, they break another tool and put the two together, and they've got the right tool and they just make things happen. The best mechanics are Australians and New Zealanders. And that all grew as well. And I think that's the bedrock of everything we see today, and where we still have drivers like Liam Lawson, and we've got some very good young Aussies as well. Those drivers are basically in lockstep with that history, with that past of that we can do this, we can make it happen. And Mark Webber's story is pretty much that. You know, Formula Ford in Australia, nobody had heard of him, came to England, you know, big tiny fish in a huge pond, wins the Formula Ford Festival, gets, you know, foot in the door. Alan Docking helps him a bit. David Campese helps him a bit. And so it goes on. And Australians just make things happen. Alan Jones never gave up. You know, his Formula One career opportunities seemed to be over. And he was back racing Formula 3000, doing well, Formula 5000, sorry, and doing well. And suddenly there's an opportunity in the Arrows team, and he goes to Arrows, and the rest is history. And he goes to Williams. And yeah, it's just playing the big points well, because they've all had tough lives in getting to where they want to be. And when the big points come, it doesn't mean anything to, oh yeah, get on with that, mate. Yeah, no worries. And so it is. Frank Maddich, similar thing. You know, no mountain was high enough for Frank. Mousedown says, maybe instead of a sprint race, spoiling the main Grand Prix, what do you guys think of qualifying per sector? A top three per sector, divide 6 points, give other drivers Hulk shot at points. Yeah, sectors. Again, you know, you got to be, yeah, the problem is It's a bit like the lesser teams running their cars empty of fuel in order to be on the front row, but then only doing 2 laps before they come in for fuel. With the sectors, you could set a car up just to be quick in one sector, couldn't you? I guess. And I think it'd be a bit uneven. I think we should all stop worrying about how to prove things and just accept what we've got, apart from the power units, which do need to be massively improved. Everything else, we just need better coverage from the TV companies in Formula One of what's going on. That's what we need to be pushing for. Aim Molghodki, I think he's asking the most complicated and impossible to answer question in a short space of time than anybody's ever invented. What exactly is the deployment? I understand it's basically how the power is being fed from battery to the wheels, but I'm trying to understand why it's so difficult to achieve it perfect deployment, because you're limited in the amount of power you can deploy because of the way the rules are written, and it's not enough to do the full lap anyway. So it's very complicated on how you actually generate it. And the problem is not so much the deployment, in my opinion, but the harvesting, the real problem. Because in order to harvest the power that is insufficient to do a lap anyway, but to harvest the power in the most efficient way possible, you have to compromise the way you use the rear axle into a corner. And in compromising the rear axle, you're taking away one of the great qualities that the great drivers use on some types of corner. That's the problem. It's not so much the deployment, but it is the deployment. Mark Slade explained it very well in the last live stream when talking about the problem Charles Leclerc had, in that he was using power to correct a slide on one part of the lap, which then meant that on another part of the lap where he needed it, i.e. the straight, he didn't have any power left. So it's all that as well. It's all nonsense. Too many regulations, too many rules. Nobody understands them, least of all the drivers. So where are we going now? Toto's happy with his driver lineup. Max is annoying and Joss is more annoying. I think Toto would say I'm happy with my driver lineup for sure. He would say that. Whether he actually thinks the driver lineup that Kimi Max would be something he'd want to refuse, I doubt that. I think he would want that if it was a possibility, which it may not be. I disagree. Max is annoying. Why do you think Max is annoying? I think he drives beautifully. What's annoying about Max? He doesn't say much, do much. He doesn't get involved with the press very much, which is good, I think. Joss is a good bloke. I WhatsApp Joss a lot, and we talk about rallying and other stuff. I mean, how many other fathers are out there thrashing through forests in Rally 2 Skodas when they've got a weekend off? I think it makes Joss an absolute star, to be honest. Brilliant. And if you don't know how quick a Rally 2 Skoda is, that's another thing that the public should be given access to. Sitting next to drivers like Joss in Rally 2 Skodas, you'd be absolutely shocked at how quick they are. I've got one, believe me. Do you think the second Ferrari engine upgrade will be enough to catch Mercedes? If so, do you then put your money on Kimi to win in an equal car to Lewis? I don't think it's just the ice that makes the difference. I think it's more the way Mercedes are managing the electrical side of their power unit that gives them the advantage. So even if Ferrari have a little bit more ice power or efficiency or weight saving or whatever it is, I don't think it's going to be enough to match Mercedes' management of their electrical side. And anyway, I don't think that's Mercedes' only advantage. I think Mercedes have got a better car than Ferrari, power units aside. And that Mark pointed that out with the way they've mounted the front wing. It's a good example. Ferrari haven't done that. And that's just one example, but definitely the Ferrari's better on high-speed corners than, sorry, the Mercedes is better on high-speed corners than the Ferrari. And it's probably better on slow-speed corners as well. It's just got more efficient downforce. It's a better car. It uses its tires better when driven by a guy like Kimi Antonelli. So then do you put your money on Kimi to win in an equal car to Lewis? You're saying if the Ferrari's as good as Mercedes, will Lewis beat Kimi? Well, I don't think the Ferrari will ever be as good as a Mercedes in 2026. That's my answer. And I think at the moment, if Lewis was at Mercedes, I think Kimi would be doing what he's doing. I mean, Lewis had trouble dealing with George. Kimi's had no trouble dealing with George. So there's no reason to think that if Lewis went to Mercedes now, that he would blow Kimi away. He wouldn't. I don't think Max would blow Kimi away. It'd be close, but and over a season, I think Max would get ahead. Maybe Lewis over a season, but Kimi is not going to get blown away by either of those guys on a race by race basis. No chance. Here's another merch idea: hybrids. No thanks. Yeah. Well, we kind of have that, don't we? With the T-shirt that says 60/40 is not enough. Right. And this is about the answer about the Kiwi and the mechanics and Jack and Bruce. Appreciate that answer. A can-do attitude. We Kiwis and Aussies are very much about do it yourself. All right. We want to say thank you for your chat tonight. Wish you all the best. Sleep well. And I'm gonna call it a day as well. Thank you very much. 11:15 in New Zealand. Wow. And Lewis had trouble in the ground effect, says Cabrito. Yeah, he did, but it was a bad ground effect car. I mean, if he'd been a Red Bull, I don't think he would have had much trouble with it, but it was just a terrible car. It was bouncing all over the place. They had no control of the center of pressure, and it was like driving a car on square wheels, as far as Lewis was concerned, after everything he'd ever done. So there we go. Thank you very much, everyone, for being a part of this, for giving me so many great storylines and chats, and we'll be back, obviously, to do the stuff over the weekend from the Belgian Grand Prix, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, plus the live chat on Sunday. So looking forward to that very much. Haven't joined as a member? Love to have you on board. Big thanks to TrackNinja, to OEM Exclusive, to Jetcraft, and of course to REC Watches. See you very soon and take care.